Testing.
Hi everyone. So we are presenting the Experience Fellowship, an experience architecture for student success, and
Hi everyone, thanks so much for that intro, and we're really excited to be here this afternoon with what we think is a fabulous crowd. Ryan and I did a presentation for last year's conference and we had 5 attendees, and we were thrilled with that, by the way. They were very engaged, but this is wonderful, so thanks for being part of this session. So we're going to be talking about the Student Experience Fellowship, which is a brand new program that's launching out of the Student Experience office. So Experience Fellows are student leaders that build on their academic pursuits at Memorial University in an exclusive leadership, development, and experiential learning opportunities. So Experience Fellows are skilled emerging leaders who illustrate the university's caring, dynamic, and creative student body. So we're really excited about this new leadership architecture. We're not calling it a program, we're calling it a framework, an architecture. And we're excited to tell you a little bit more about it and looking forward to getting some of your feedback on how it might be useful to some of the students that you work with as well. Yeah.
And I'm going to interrupt because it's the camera.
Oh, sorry.
We can't hide too far.
Definitely. I'm going to steal this.
Sure.
Too.
Yeah.
Okay, great. This is good? Okay, perfect. All right, so to start us off, I just wanted to do a little bit of a framing around what is the problem that we're trying to solve here. So the question is, how do conventional co-curricular programs approach student engagement? So when we think about your typical student leadership program here at Memorial University, and I think that this isn't just a Memorial problem, I think it's an issue that we're seeing at universities across the country and internationally as well. But when we think about our typical student leadership or co-curricular program, we're thinking about a conference on a Saturday, a leadership development workshop, we're thinking about maybe an opportunity for a student to get involved in a club or society or to take on a leadership role in residence. So it's lots of different things, but ultimately we're getting the students to come to us. And through our kind of self-study of Student Experience Office, we found that there's approximately 360 students per year that are participating in our conventional leadership or experiential learning programs. So this is about 2% of the total student cohort, which, isn't great. And so we've kind of done a little bit of self-reflection in terms of why might that be and what are some ways that we can actually be going to the students and creating opportunities for them to engage with us in a more meaningful way. And before we get maybe started even further, maybe we should introduce ourselves. So sorry about that. I always forget to do that. So my name is Jen Crow, and currently I'm working with institutional events here at the university, but transitioning over to student life in about a month in a student leadership development capacity.
Jen is the incoming Student Leadership Development Coordinator. I am the outgoing Student Leadership Development Coordinator, so I'll actually be finishing my post on June 19th, and Jen will be taking over.
And I'm Lisa Russell. I've been in student affairs, loosely defined, here at the university for about 18 years. A long stretch of that time was spent in career education for a variety of different roles, and I've been in the Student Experience Office for the last 2 years, and reimagining what student leadership development would look like and how we could impact greater numbers of students has been a big part of that focus over the last 2 years.
Great. So to get things underway, the first question we want to ask is basically, so knowing that we are engaging about 2% of our entire student body in our traditional leadership programming, what does this mean that our students aren't leaders? And I think, how many people think that our students aren't leaders here at Memorial? Probably not very many, right? We have a fabulous cohort of students at this university who are doing exceptional things, and I think all we need to do is open the Gazette on any given day to know that. So, our answer to this question is no. But we do think that this comes into effect here. So the idea of social determinants of experiential learning, leadership, and development. So what is it that's limiting the opportunity for students to engage in our current traditional programming? So, you know, some of the things that we hear often when we survey students is, yeah, it's great that you had that leadership conference on a Saturday, but I work Saturdays and Sundays so I can pay tuition. You know, yeah, like I really wanted to come out for that workshop that you were hosting on a Thursday evening, but I just don't have transportation. Like my ride is at 3:30 or 4 o'clock, or it would mean that I'd have to get a late bus home. We hear all of those kinds of things. And I don't think that we're alone in hearing that. I think that there's real barriers that students face unequally in the post-secondary education world in terms of accessing these opportunities that we know are so critical to development as a student, to enhancing your career development, and really to like allowing yourself to have those opportunities to engage with people in the community and to being able to strengthen your network. So we want to kind of throw it back to you folks and our folks who are joining us online as well, and talk about in your own areas, in your own experiences engaging with students. And that could be through formal programming or through, you know, advising or through your informal interactions with students. What are the social determinants of engagement in your area? So what is prohibiting students from getting involved and engaged in the things that you're offering? And maybe we can do yeah. Does anyone have an idea? Yeah.
I think the gap that exists in terms of we constantly think of the student that's here on campus, that is able to be here physically on campus. And I'm not just talking about online students that come from CIPL, and that's our part of our focus. But I think we need to be thinking more broadly about how do we provide the services for the same services we provide to our students who are able to be here physically on this campus, and to the students who can't be, either because they're working or because they have health issues or because they need accommodations or whatever the reason may be. There are a tremendous number of gaps, and the online student, of course, sees a lot of that as well.
What's your name? Colleen. So Colleen mentioned the barrier of, sorry, mic's on now. Colleen mentioned the barrier that I think we see all the time too, which is providing the same quality of services and programmings and these exceptional opportunities to students who can be on campus and those who can't be on campus. And that happens for all kinds of reasons, whether it's the limits of, you know, the 9 to 5 that you have here on campus and that's contingent on your transportation, or it's that you're doing distance education from somewhere else in this province or in this country or in the world. So I think that that's a great point in terms of access. Any other? Yeah, sorry. And what's your name? Andrea.
Hi. So I work in the Faculty of Medicine in Student Affairs, and what we see with many of our students, so they're full-time MD only on campus physically for the first 2 years of the 4-year program. So the rest of the other 2 years could be Newfoundland, Labrador, they might be in St. John's doing rotations in the Health Science Centre or the Waterford, or they could be in New Brunswick or any of our distributed sites. So again, not only just students who are learning by distance, like Colleen said, but the students that would want to participate if they had the opportunities, but they can't physically be here. So how do we engage them in whatever it is we want to engage them in while they're away? Part of that is also our accreditation expectations, that we provide equal opportunities for students who are studying at distributed sites. So they have to have the same access to supports and services as the students while they're on campus. So, you know, not only do we want to engage students, but we're also expected to do that for accreditation.
And do you, sorry, just as a follow-up, do you feel that your students, while they are here on campus and they're not away doing their placements, do you feel that they are getting that kind of immersive student experience where they are highly engaged and involved and that kind of thing?
Most, I think, are, but the ones that aren't in the first 2 years, I think, again, would be the students who might have families, who physically aren't as close to campus, who might have to leave, you know, as soon as the day ends, and aren't able to participate in the extracurricular for different reasons. Could be transportation, could be other things. The majority, I think, especially the medical students, are highly engaged for a whole host of different reasons. But there are still some who face challenges. There's some, you know, not many, but some do have children, and then okay, I have to get home right away, you know, whenever classes end at whatever time, because, you know, there's other people people in the family scenario. So, yeah, still some challenges.
Yeah, great. And interesting to think about those different populations as well. I think we'll take one more. Lynn? Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Don't worry about it. Go ahead.
We can do both. We can do both. Yeah.
I'm Lynn. I work with I run the alumni office, so I have a different kind of experience than most of you here. But one of the things I hear, particularly from our younger alumni, is that they're afraid that this is a different kind of group, or it might be, all my friends from town are in that group, and I'm not from town. Or it was a bit scary to look at that because I don't have any background in that. So I think there's a social barrier that is self-constructed as well, and I hear that. I got a kid at MUN, and I hear that from her friends too. I can't really do that. I don't. Leadership, I'm not a leader, or I'm not a this or a that.
Yeah, definitely.
That captures.
Thanks. Yeah. And Lynn, I think that's an excellent point, and certainly one that we hear a lot is that, it's easy for us to not think about the fear and the anxieties that come with coming to a post-secondary university when you're used to your high school of 100, 200, 300, even 1,000, and coming to an institution of 14,000, I think is really intimidating. And then, encouraging or trying to empower students to get involved outside the classroom is really an extra challenge on top of everything else they're experiencing. Lisa, maybe we can get you. Yeah, this is one more. Sorry, it took a reel.
Oh, that's okay. So I'm from the School of Pharmacy, and I find most of our students are very engaged, but we do, and some of the things that you just touched on, when they have part-time jobs or they have other commitments, and sometimes I find the students actually that are from town are sometimes less engaged because they have so many other social networks and other things, whereas the ones who come from out of province or other areas, this is a way for them to meet people and get involved. So that's one thing we do find. And I think the other population that we notice is the more mature students who already have a family and have other commitments, and they're really kind of in school and they need to go home and do all their other responsibilities. So, those are considerations.
Yes, absolutely. Thanks so much. And considering beyond the 18-year-old demographic or 18 to 22 demographic, I think is really important in talking about some of this. What does it mean when you're trying to balance these kind of co-curricular involvements that, again, we know are important with having a family or young children, or even just additional responsibilities outside of school and work. So I think, that's a great point to bring up. So I want to move along, but I think that this is great because you totally proved our point, which is that I think the barriers that we're hearing from students and the low engagement rates that we're experiencing with some of our programming, it's an experience that I think is being felt across the institution. And I think the barriers that we're hearing from students are barriers that are being faced by many of us in this room in terms of how we engage with students in formal programming, in one-on-one engagements, and in other opportunities where we have, the privilege of engaging with the fabulous students here on our campus. Anything else that you folks would like to add?
That captures it.
Great.
Yeah.
Pass it along.
So Lisa. You can tap again.
So you have to be between the board? Okay. Oh, okay. Yeah.
Okay. So we're used to being able to roam a little more freely, so this is constraining us just a little bit. So one of the things that we did when we started looking at how can we offer leadership opportunities, how can we offer development for students in a completely different way than we have been previously. And really what we did is we sat down and we kind of said, we're going to start over from the beginning, and what are the principles that we want to use to guide that. And so we actually came up with some that are not going to be revolutionary, but they were revolutionary for how leadership development was previously offered, at least through our office. So the first one is that we wanted students to be able to begin anywhere. So there's no common start to what we've created in the Experience Fellows. There's no common experience that is the only way that a student can begin this journey. It really allows them to start wherever they are at any given point in any year of study, so that they really have that flexibility to discover it in their third year, to discover it in their first semester, or to discover it in their final semester, and just work their way through and engage with the series of suggested experiences that allow them to capture the range of what development offers them at Memorial. The second one was really we want them to be able to count what they've already done. I mean, all of us have had that experience that students do so many things when they're here. And no matter what office we're in, we don't know everything that those students have done. And so we don't want students to have to repeat experiences with us or experiences that we've approved, when in fact they've probably already had experiences that more than meet the requirements for the kind of learning and development that we're trying to facilitate. So through the shell that we've created, through the Brightspace site that's been built, and through the scaffolding that the Experienced Fellows has created, we actually provide students an opportunity where they can kind of say, I've already done this, and this is the learning that I took from it, even if they didn't do it with us, even if they didn't do it with something that we have kind of put on after they came to the Experienced Fellows program. And again, the value of that is that it makes it so that if they do join in third year or they join in fourth year, if they've already done a whole lot of things, those things do count. This is not about having to make them jump through new hoops and tick off our boxes. This is their journey, and we want to make sure that we're just working with them to make them reflect on what they've experienced so that they identify the learning they're taking from that. Because ultimately, they are the goal for this. It's their development that matters the most. It's not whether we end up with an extra attendee or two in any of the programming that we offer. We just want to encourage more students to do more things, because the more they do on campus, the more connected they feel, the more they feel a sense of belonging, and the more developed and well-rounded they'll be when they leave. So we also want them to level up. So we start with a wide range of things that we want them to do, kind of as entry-level type things, very, very diverse. But then we've structured the Experienced Fellows so that students who are interested in those slightly more complex or more demanding roles, or they really want to look for higher engagement or higher commitment, there are opportunities for that, but you don't have to do it. But we want them to have a way to structure and think about what they're doing. The pathways, the absence of pathways is one of the challenges that we sometimes talk about. We had a session in this room earlier this morning where we were talking about the system and what does the system look like for how we structure and touch on students' lives. It's very, very complex, and we certainly haven't gotten to clarifying all of that, but we've certainly done our best to create a structure that helps make some of those opportunities and the value of engaging in those opportunities clearer to more students. And then we want it to be self-paced and self-directed. So again, this could be done in one semester. This could take you 4 years to do. Some students would accomplish this in probably a few weeks, knowing some of the keeners that we've had the privilege to work with. And again, the goal of this is to allow students the flexibility to accommodate. Am I on campus? Am I not on campus? Do I have family? Am I on a work term? Is this a really demanding semester and I have to take a pause on everything else that I'm doing, but I'd like to pick it up again? Students have health issues. They have family challenges that cause them sometimes to experience either needing to sometimes become a part-time student before they come back to being a full-time student or finishing their degree. And this is meant to be flexible for all of those different kind of scenarios. Once students begin it, they can get to the point where they complete it, but there's no incentive in terms of a certain time frame in which they have to do that. There are incentives there to complete it, and we'll talk about those a little bit later, but not necessarily by putting them on our timetable and our time schedule. And the hope is that that can facilitate greater student engagement and participation. So, reflection and definition, and I spoke about this just a few minutes ago. The goal here is really to help students do that reflection. Students do lots of things. Our office offers a range of opportunities for students to do different things, but our office is hardly alone. There are numerous other operations, both in the student affairs, very broadly defined category, but as well within the faculties and schools that offer students huge opportunities to do really impactful things, sometimes for credit, sometimes for non-credit activities. But that's a great thing, and we actually want students to do more of those things. But right now, we don't have any really kind of structured mechanism by which we can encourage that, other than by word of mouth in encouraging individual students one-on-one. You should do that. you should really get involved. You should try the next thing that's related to this, or you really enjoyed that, so maybe check out the next offering in that series. We have students who participate in student-run academic journals. They take part in research seminars. They're part of research projects. They do all kinds of things. This is really meant to just give them an opportunity to think about what they've done and see how that connects to their own awareness and understanding of leadership. We do believe that every single student has the inherent leadership within them. Many of our students are not necessarily comfortable in identifying that, and that's part of our project, is to help bring that out for more students. The step-by-step nudges in the right direction. When Ryan walks us through what the Brightspace site looks like, you'll see how the site is designed to help nudge them from one experience to another. Again, whether it's our event or not, it's not relevant to us. We just want them to keep doing different things and keep building more experiences that allow them to apply and expand that range of what they've seen, what they've learned, and what they can take from that. And again, helping them discover. And this really speaks to an experience mapping project that we started, goodness, year ago,
Yeah,
year and a half
2
ago.
probably.
So experience mapping came a little bit after we kind of started this conversation, but it's very much related, because experience mapping is really about helping students map themselves, for themselves, what are the experiences they want to have while they're at university. And that's a huge question when students can't see everything that's available to them. And so part of what we're doing as well is trying to map out, well, what are those experiences and where are they located and when can they do them? But the experience fellowships in terms of how it's structured, how it's scaffolded, is it's encouraging them to also look in certain areas that they may not have thought to look before. But giving them certain categories of things that they should intentionally try and seek out so that they can help map and plan what they want to do. The course planning is there. It's in the calendar. There are academic advisors that you can visit who will help you figure out what courses should I do to get what I want to get out of my program. Some of the courses have programs are very restricted. Some of them have a lot more flexibility. But that part is really easy for students to see. What are the range of courses that are available in any given term? Experience mapping is trying to kind of bridge that gap for that co-curricular side of things, where there isn't one place that students can go to see what are all the things that are available to me in any given term.
Can I jump in?
Yeah.
One thing that one of the things that struck me from the most recent session, if anybody caught that panel, was maybe it's because we've been spending 2 years building this hammer, and now I'm really excited when I see nails. But the stories that we heard from those students really do echo the kinds of things that we're trying to drive with the Experience Fellowship. Students are, I think if you asked each of those 3 students if they were leaders, they might not have said yes, right? And that's one of the things about leadership development. We're charged with developing this capacity in people that people are usually afraid of. And as a result, we have to kind of sneak that leadership development and that leadership identity into people. We have to find ways of helping students who are terrified of the world. We have to help them realize that they have a capacity to engage with the world in a really intentional and powerful way. And so you can't do that by saying, come to this leadership development seminar. It just doesn't work. It results in 2% of people who have already found that identity coming out to our sessions, but everybody else kind of misses the opportunity. And yet we know that every single one of the things that those students we heard from an hour ago, everything they did is a leadership act, right? And so the question becomes, how do we help them redefine what that act is in terms of leadership? And even if they don't end up calling it leadership, it doesn't matter as long as they're still trying to drive that kind of intentional, more powerful engagement of the world. And so I just wanted to bring it back to that panel session, because that panel was really a great indication to me that we need to keep helping students find those kinds of opportunities that those students really were excited about. So.
No, I'm glad you jumped in, Ryan, because Ryan will talk about it a little bit later. Mm-hmm. But actually, in working with Experience Fellowships, we really haven't used the word leadership. Mm-hmm. And that has been very intentional on our part to not use the word leadership for a lot of the reasons that Ryan has articulated. And, again, in terms of thinking about how students identify themselves, I've got a daughter in junior high, and it's come to my attention that within the K-12 system, there's only a cohort of students who are kind of involved in leadership, right? So they don't treat every student like they have the potential or the capacity for leadership. Mm-hmm. There is a small group. So they come into university, I think, with this idea that there's only a few students who have leadership. And everybody else just doesn't. And we, and the literature, I would say, supports us in having the opposite view, which is that leadership can be cultivated, that leadership is something that largely is inherent and can be strengthened, it can be built, and it comes out in very, very different ways, and we want students to know that. It's not a one-size-fits-all demonstration of what it means to be a leader or to have leadership, and that, again, is part of how the Experienced Fellows is structured and is trying to achieve. Mm-hmm. So, and the benefits for us, you know, we don't want to have the programming that's available through our office to be seen as competition. We don't want to be competing with ourselves. We don't want students to feel like I have to choose between what you're doing or what's being offered in a different office or faculty or program. We just want students to feel like there's a lot that they can choose from, and they can fit what works for them, what works for their schedule, what works for their development, what works for their interest. And so offering this in the way that we have has been very intentional to make sure that it is not being offered in that other sense. And we are kind of taking this from that pyramid approach. We want to establish a really wide, broad base of students who have done more than they would have done if Experienced Fellows wasn't there. And then continue to build that up as they continue to level up and increase the things that they do and the development that they expose themselves to, so that we get here at Memorial, in every faculty in school, at every level, undergraduate and graduate, more students who have done more things and have more awarenesses and more experiences that they can draw on when they leave this place, whenever graduation comes around. Benefits for our partners, again, there's you know, more incentives to get involved, and a way to direct students forward when they come seeking advice. So that whole experience mapping initiative that's underway is meant to become a resource that other people can point students to when a student comes and goes, I'm really interested in X, or I want to see if I can learn more about this. It would be a way of helping those students plan out what does that next step look like. And the benefits for the students, we've got easy access to engagement, guidance on making the most of Memorial, the big fancy title, and then again, to develop those identities as leaders and a sense of ownership and comfort with that word, which right now, you know, is certainly not there. Mm-hmm. Now, I'm very conscious of time, so I think I'll pose this question, but I'll leave it to Ryan perhaps at the end of his to wrap things up.
Sure.
And that's, how might these ideas, right, not necessarily the fellowship, but some of the principles and approach that we've talked about, really help and connect, you know, and empower the students that you're working with in your respective faculty, schools, programs, wherever that might be. And I'll turn it over to Ryan now, just because we're getting low on time.
Yeah, 15 left, is that right? 15? Okay, great. So we've been talking about what the problem was, right? We framed the problem that we're trying to address with this initiative, with this architecture. We've talked about the principles that we came up with in order to try to drive the architecture, but we haven't yet talked about what the architecture actually looks like. And you'll note that I'm getting an echo, I am using that word architecture, not program, very intentionally, because as Lisa just pointed out, we're not trying to compete here. We're not trying to offer something that students sign up for and then they're in that thing. The beauty of the architecture, the beauty of this initiative is that students can sign up for anything and also be working towards their Experienced Fellowship. And so let's talk about what that actually is. It's not a program, it's a scaffolding. And that starts really with this idea of a title. One of the first questions we're always asked when we bring this up is, like, is it something they'll get on their transcript? Not yet. Maybe someday, you know, it's something we need to fight for. It's something that is quite complicated to do, to integrate these things deeply with the academic side of our institution. But even if it isn't a transcript, from our consultations with students, and we've done a lot of qualitative research on this, students are really excited with this idea of becoming an Experienced Fellow. And one of the best parts of this title is that due to the way the fellowship is helps students build their own experience to meet that requirement, to become a fellow, every single fellowship is actually different. Because the way that you engage with faculty, and I'll walk you through these requirements in a bit, the way that you engage with faculty in the community, the way that you link your academic studies in, those result in very different, what would be programs for every single unique student. And so you're achieving a title, but when you talk about what that title means in a resume or in an interview or in a scholarship application or whatever, you're talking about a completely different experience, even though you're all using the same fellowship title. The goal is that, as Lisa just pointed out, everybody has a breadth of experience and they have a foundation of engagement with the institution that they can talk about. So that's the title. This is what the fellowship looks like. And I meant to bring a handout, and I didn't. So if you want a version of this that you can read and engage with, by all means, let me know, and I can email it to you, no problem. But there's a set of requirements for people before they become a fellow. This is when we call them candidates. So they sign up for this at any point in their university career. It could be their 4th year of their PhD program. It could be, that first day of their undergraduate experience. But at any point, they can declare themselves a candidate. And they can, as Lisa has pointed out, already have done some things. They might have already volunteered on campus, and you'll see how that feeds into the requirements. But they might not have gotten involved with a student group. They might not have gone to a seminar offered by their faculty. And so all of these different things allow them to piece together their experience under whatever pattern they want to put together. So they complete these requirements, and I'll walk you through those in more detail in a bit. They become a fellow at a point of what we're calling advancement. We're trying to come up with a word that isn't convocation, right? To try and match that kind of regal evolution. And then once they're a fellow, and this is the to-be-developed part of the initiative, the idea is that we'll offer these exclusive opportunities called Senior Experience Fellows. And Senior Experience Fellows will draw from this base to help fit with things like welcome programming. So we have our year-long welcome programming. Julia runs it. She's in the audience. And the hope is that our Experience Fellows will be this great, huge population of students who are very experienced with the rest of campus, and therefore they'll be able to drive these kinds of initiatives. And we're hoping that partners like you will also be interested in drawing from that same cohort of students to be able to become Senior Experience Fellows and do something neat. And what really is crucial about this Senior Experience Fellowship is that it's at that point that the student is developing and creating their own unique contribution to campus and community life. So it's at that point that they are building something themselves, that they're helping manifest and solve some problem, and that's what we're hoping really characterizes Senior Experience Fellows.
Just if I could jump in, Ryan,
Please,
before you move on.
Yeah.
The other layer that we are currently working with that would be a senior level of that are the Memorial Ambassadors. So
Right.
some of you may be familiar with that program, which has up to now been run as a separate standalone, but again with quite a bit of work on offering professional development to these students once they're admitted to the program, to bring their development and their awareness of certain issues and factors up to the level that we want, if we want them and are going to appoint them and designate them as Memorial Ambassadors. The idea of this would be that while there is still some additional training that Memorial Ambassadors would access once being accepted into the Ambassador program, that a lot of that kind of foundational development and exposure would already be taken care of at a more junior level.
Thanks. So the 7 requirements at that candidacy level. One is, and again, there's no particular pattern or forced order here. They can start at any given requirement and end at any given requirement. So I'll just walk you through a couple of examples. One is to simply explore campus. And some of the examples of the things they need to do in that category are simply talk to a faculty member, right? And once they've talked to a faculty member or a staff person and had a real conversation with somebody, they can tick off one of the sub-requirements of that category. So that's the explore. Contribute involves, and this shows how we're trying not to compete with other programming, you simply need to complete the Student Volunteer Bureau's bronze level. That's 20 hours of volunteering and a reflection session. Once you've achieved that, you can tick off the contribution component. Another one is this dive-in requirement where students have to do a deep experience on campus. And that means something, and this is one of the areas where we're trying to curate a set of experiences that qualify for that. And so an example is running a session at our annual Student Leadership Conference. So that's where you're really diving in, you're trying to step outside of your comfort zone, and you're trying to deliver something that is a deep impact kind of experience. So again, I can give you a handout with way more details on these things, and we can also link you the resources that exist on the web, but for time, I'm going to move on for now. Thanks. So it's mentioned in the proposal. Unfortunately, Dr. Byrne couldn't be here, but we're really interested in exploring what the effect of this program is on leadership identity. And so we're developing, because this uses Brightspace, we have the ability to use some interesting Brightspace tools in order to compare the effect of calling students leaders and not leaders, and to see what that means for how students decide to engage in different levels of the program. So this is a neat opportunity because the data could be really rich, right? We're using Brightspace to track requirements, and I'll show you that in a second. but we can do A/B testing where the same language is used, only in one place. That idea, that intimidating concept of leadership is the language we use. And then in another place we use other words like engagement and experience and so on. And so we're going to run this project as the fellowship develops and do small tests to see if we can't encourage students to develop more, or to test whether or not there's a difference, say, on different demographics and the effect of being called a leader, because this is an underexplored area of the literature. So one of my last tasks is simply to show you how we've made Brightspace a little different. And you're going to have to watch me log in, which is always a fun experience for people.
No pressure.
No.
Password right.
Yeah. You gotta be secure. It's important. So we've done a lot to try and make this Brightspace site look a little different from the conventional shell. So right away you see that it doesn't have the traditional homepage. We tried to level up the iconography that we're using for the fellowship on the site. We've customized the homepage to make it look a little bit different. And as I scroll down, you'll start to see that list of requirements that I showed you earlier. And as you dive into these, I'll just use the content section, which we've renamed to call it the progress and next actions section. You can actually start to see what options you have in order to level up through the fellowship. And so that sub requirement that I talked about before of connecting with staff or faculty is right here. And the way we're facilitating these requirements, the way we're validating them, is through a reflection. Again, the concept is we can't judge if a student has had a genuine staff or faculty conversation. So we're putting a lot of the onus on students for this. We're trying to share with them the sort of important, regal nature of this program. We're trusting them to consider, not program, see, it's a practice, this architecture. We're trusting them to think really deeply about what it means to connect with staff or faculty. We're using language in the reflection that kind of reflects that. And what they'll do is, once they've talked to somebody, they go in here and they complete a little reflection that gets submitted to us. And then that gets completed as it has been over here. And over time, as they complete the different subcomponents of these requirements, we are leveraging Brightspace's badging tools in order to award these different kinds of badges. So you've seen them before, but these unlock the different levels of the fellowship. And the last thing that I will mention is that some of these components won't be available until you complete earlier components. So, for instance, connecting with, actually, I can't remember what a good path example is off the top of my head. Well, one key one is becoming an experienced fellow. That's that advancement opportunity that I talked about before. That won't be available or visible to students until they complete all of the other components. So we're using Brightspace's conditional release tools, is what they're called, in order to make sure that they have completed all these other things before they try to engage with that part. So if you ever want to walk through this a little bit more in detail and see what we've done, by all means. I'm not going to go into the reflection section because students have submitted their own reflections there and they're personal. I don't want to share that. But it's a pretty neat concept, or it's a pretty neat sort of flex of what Brightspace is capable of. And the last thing that I'll mention, Lisa kind of touched on this in the principles, but because this is run on Brightspace, it's the term that I like to use is it's infinitely scalable. One of the problems, as Lisa mentioned with some of these programs, is that if you've got a program and you only have capacity for 40 people in it, then you've got 40 people who can be leaders, 40 people who can be engaged, and N minus 40 people who can't. And so you're drawing a line there because of the logistical requirements of the program that limit access to opportunity for all these other students. And so this is a really neat opportunity to be able to scale leadership development to an infinite capacity. We can have 14,000 undergrads and 4,000 graduate students in this fellowship at once. And as long as the design is effective, and we hope that it is, they will be reflecting on the experiences that they do in powerful ways and developing leadership identity at a scale that currently isn't available through on-hand, in-person experiences. So with that, I'll shift back to our final question, and we can go back and forth in questions a little bit. So we had two. Lisa had to skip over one because of timing. But one was, how does this concept of these principles help you and think about your programming, and is there an opportunity there? And the second one is, are there opportunities to engage with the fellowship in your area? Is there a way for us to take those requirements and help you promote the things that you're doing to students who are interested in completing the fellowship and therefore double promote at the same time. So we would love to facilitate a conversation around both of those things if that's interesting to you. Those are big questions. I don't know if I framed it in a concrete enough way. Yeah. Thanks again for volunteering to run it.
And Michelle and I both work in student affairs in medicine, and I said a few minutes ago our MD students would be all over this. I mean, we'd have huge uptake. I mean, engaging them wouldn't be a problem. They all love the concept of leadership, most, I can say all. For them, as they get ready to graduate and apply for residency programs, there's a whole host of different pieces that go along with their applications for residency, and how they've been engaged in co-curricular activities would be one of them. Would there be any type of certificate that they may be able to upload then with their residency applications? Because I know previously with co-curricular record was something we were going to be driving them towards as another piece that they could use, and so would there be any type of certificate then once completed?
Yeah, absolutely.
So co-curricular record is kind of on its way. It's kind of fallen into a bit of disuse, and we're leaning into some other platforms a little bit more. One of the things that I know we have some discussions around now would be what's called an experiential transcript or an experiential record of things that students have done that involve reflection, that identify what the students have taken from it. And so I think something like that might lend itself very nicely for medical students. In the interim, before we get to that solution, if students required something from somebody confirming that they have completed something, again, our office could certainly facilitate that. And through Brightspace, again, we've different engagements that we've had already as we've soft launched this over this last winter term. We've already had students kind of download certificates that confirm completion of certain components of this. Again, we're trying to make this so that it isn't time intensive on any individual one person. So if we get 150 people do something and we thought there was only going to be 30, well, we're not actually printing 150 certificates. If students want one, the ability is there for them to download it for themselves, and it's protected so that they can't just mock it up and have it be for their friend. But it's meant to be scalable on that level. So there's absolutely ways that we can come up with that would meet the needs of med students in the interim, but I do think that a more university-wide system is coming. Yeah.
Thank you.
Hi, it's Jana Rosales from engineering, and I'd love to jump on board with this because I've got access to all of the engineering students.
Deal.
Yeah, so I'm on board. I'm curious, how do you walk them through the reflection side of things? Because it's always a struggle when you're trying to get people to reflect on stuff that they're just going to write something out at the last minute and say, oh, that's good enough, rather than kind of coaching them through and guiding through, giving them feedback. I mean, when they're in this architecture, how much human contact do they have with someone on the other side of whatever the architecture is?
Right. Yeah, that's a question. We can use Brightspace's tools to sort of level the reflections so that they have to submit something and then they get that. We could review it and then respond back. Well, there are some deep questions around that for me because of that, like, well, what is an authentic connection with faculty or staff? And if we start to evaluate that, how do we draw lines and rubrics around things that are really, really tough? So we should have a chat as your 200-ish engineering students come on board. We're all, by all means, let's find ways to make sure that it's rich reflection and not a shallow reflection. But I think what I've tried to do is do that through the writing of the question to make sure that the question and that the fellowship itself actually feels really important, so that students are taking their time. And so far, we've done a soft launch of the platform over the past few months. We added students who engage with Make Minter Matter and let them download certificates, as it happens, through fellowship, and didn't tell them anything about the platform. So we just added these students